morning, all. Thank you for coming, for taking your time to attend the Opportunity Unlock discussion on international event Venice Biennale. I am Nasreen, a junior year architecture and sustainable design student, and I'll be the moderator for today's discussion. So let me introduce you to the panel. Starting from the left, we have Prof Michael Budig, assistant professor at the ASD pillar. And then we have Amanda and Chunwei, who graduated with a master's in architecture in 2018. Amanda and Chunwei. And then we have Shafiq, who is a current senior year in SCTD. Joining us live from Studio 4, we have Prof Jason Lim, lecturer from the SCTD ASD pillar, and Rachel, an alumnus who has recently completed her Master of Architecture. Okay, yeah. So before we kickstart this panel discussion, let me provide all of you with information about the discussion that we'll be having today. So students enrolled in the ASD course are provided with many working opportunities with the faculty here. And today we shall cover one aspect, which is the opportunity to work on international events, specifically the Venice Biennale. SCTD ASD has been fortunate to be able to work and contribute to the Venice Biennale to provide students international exposure in the field of architecture. Just a note for all audiences, if you do have any questions that you would like to address during the panel Q&A, you have the option to fill up your query through the Google form, which you can access by scanning the QR code. Or for the virtual participants, you can click on the URL link in the Zoom chat. So with that, we will start off by getting Prof Jason and Rachel to talk about working on the Venice Biennale 2018, followed by Prof Michael, Amanda, Chunwei, and Shafiq to talk about Venice Biennale 2020. So Prof Jason, you may proceed.
Okay, hi everybody. Let me see how this works. Okay, while we sort out the technical issues, okay. So happy today to share with you some of the work we did. Okay, so yes, my name is Jason. I was involved in the Venice Biennale 2018. So first of all, Venice Biennale is it's quite a famous or prestigious exhibition that is held every 2 years in Venice. Okay, so you're either invited to go and show something, or most of the time countries will kind of build something, design something, and showcase it there. So in that year, 2018, I was part of the curatorial team. So it was led by Erwin, the head of our ASD. So with Keng Hua from ASD as well. And then on the NUS side, we also include Tomo Isa, as well as Yen, okay, from NUS side. So it was a collaborative effort. So I was part of the curatorial team as well as I led the design together with Yen. So my company is called Takahashi Lim, A+D, and then Yen leads Genome Architecture. So I'll talk to you about this project. So this is just a quick shot, so let's go. I don't want to go talk too much about the design. I actually just want to show you more about how the students really helped us in this project. So just to keep it very short, the idea was that in Venice, there are a lot of constraints in this space. So we wanted to build something that hangs from the ceiling. And we had this idea to make this kind of sculptural thing. We call it, it's called Delight. It's a lattice cloud. We wanted to work with light. So we worked with this kind of material called, it's plastic. And we sort of developed a way to heat it up and tie it in knots. So one thing I forgot to mention, so while we were doing this project, I had two interns from SUTD with me for 2 consecutive years. So the first year was a student called Ines, who is now studying overseas. And then later on, Rachel joined us. So this first part, Ines was with me, helping a lot. And then later on, Rachel can talk a little bit about what she did in the second part of the project. Okay, so yeah, this is the thing. So the idea, let's go. So the idea was that we designed this thing. It was a very, very tight budget and very tight schedule. So we opened it up to students to help us, let's say. So we organized a workshop, and we designed it in such a way that this big cloud can be constructed out of very small modules of plastic, and then we can join them up together very quickly. So we organized a workshop. So these are some of our students from one batch above you, right? This one? Yeah. So they're working already. Um, and then so they come to the school, we teach them, and then they learn how to heat up the thing, heat up the knots, and then bend it, and then form it. So this is one of the results. It was very fun. We had the SUTD students, and because we collaborate with NUS as well, we also invite the NUS students down to join the workshop. So here are some more pictures. So literally, if you go outside, they were working. We set up the tables next door, right? And then they help us knot everything. And then here you can see some of the students who just did thesis, I think, right? This is the batch. So they will produce a lot of modules. I think we had to have 1,400 of them. And so here we do a bit of quality control, okay? And you can see them smiling, so I assume they're having fun. On the right side, we also had a core group of students who were very interested in this project. So that's Ines over there in blue. Ines is sort of taking the lead of all the students. So she will help organize, make sure everything is done. And here we moved into a different room because now we're in the next picture, we'll show you we start to assemble all these together. Yep, so there's Ines, Shoba, there's Katie there, and Chinman. So yes, so we basically have to, after we make all these modules, we got to check that everything is correct. Okay, there are no cracks in the module. Aesthetically, it looks okay. And then we have to organize it. And we have to do it in a very short time because we have to take all these things, all these little plastic tetrahedral knots, and we have to pack it. You can see in the second picture on the right, all these boxes. We got to pack it in a box, and then we got to send it to Venice, and someone else going to assemble it. So in this room, again, Ines was helping me, and Ines, that smaller team, we will take as a very first study to check if our design that we see in the computer will actually work. So here we actually built the full scale mock-up of just one section. And then we're convinced, yes, okay, it's strong enough. It's not going to drop on somebody's head. Okay, so we worked very closely with the students. They were very helpful. I remember some NUS students, they were taking it and then they will shake, just to see if anything drops. So that they really took part in this phase of the design. Yeah, we can play this. Okay, so this is now we are already in Venice. Okay, so how we do is that we work with the Italians in Venice itself. So they receive all these modules, and then they just get the box, and then we have some drawing. So it's very it could be very difficult for them to understand how to sort of assemble this together. So as part of the opportunities we provided at SUTD, we actually sent Ines over to Venice. So Ines followed me to Venice for 1 month. So she had to sort of supervise because I had to keep going back and forth between Venice. So when I'm not there, she's there to tell the installers what you have to do, is this correct or not? And then she helps me to troubleshoot all the problems because sometimes I had to be here. And she also got an opportunity at the end at Venice. She managed to present her work that she did in my studio at the Venice Biennale as well to the very famous architect Kazuo Sejima. So it's I think she had a lot of fun. She learned a lot, and it was a great exposure for her. You see all the kind of famous architects and all the projects that they did. So yeah, this is it. Okay, so that's how it's installed. Thankfully, everything went well. So you can see it's basically a sculpture on the ceiling, and then it's programmed with different lights that respond, as you'll see later on, to to the content that we're projecting on the film. Okay, so this is after we finish installing it. So this idea that, it's not so much about how the thing looks like, we was more interested how this sculpture starts to capture the light. Oh, yeah, so this is how it looks when it's lit up. So this is in the space. Okay, so it's a very beautiful building with very old wooden rafters. So we hang it from the ceiling. It's programmed with light. You see those two little squares at the bottom? Those are projections. So our idea was to showcase to the world all these projects in Singapore that we thought are very delightful. That did a lot with very little. So the cloud also responds to the content by matching the colors of the video. So yes, this is the name of Singapore's contribution by our team. It's called No More Free Space, question mark. And so it was the idea of architectural design making use of things which are freely available. How you make use of light, how you make use of greenery, how you make use of air. That was what we wanted to showcase. And we needed this lattice cloud to not only represent this idea that, oh, you can do something quite beautiful out of something that's free, which is light, right? You don't think so much about light, but if you make something that can capture and emphasize the qualities of light, it suddenly becomes something worth your attention. But the other point that we wanted the sculpture was also to delight the visitor. So actually, we programmed into our cloud, it's actually interactive. So at the ends of these lights, it can detect your proximity to you. And so if you go close to the cloud, parts of the cloud lights up. If you put your hand, it can detect, and only that section will start to light up. And then we also put scents, so smells, in these ceramic tubes. So if you go very close to it, as this lady is trying to do, she's trying to get a sense of the smell. So this idea of the cloud is not just a sculpture, it is something that recognizes your presence and tries to make you smile. Okay. So this is the second part. We can play this as well. So in 2019, we took the whole, so Venice Biennale works where you present the work, they leave it for around a year. So after that, we brought it back, packed it back in the boxes, and we restaged the Venice Biennale at the National Design Center. Okay, so I don't know if you've been to this building. It's at Middle Road, okay, near the National Library. So same idea, we're going to take the same thing, we're going to hang it from the ceiling. So at this time, Rachel joined me as an intern. So again, running back and forth, I told Rachel helped out by she is able. This is quite a complicated structure. So there's the drawings it cannot be described easily through drawing. So the only way to understand it is through the computer program. So at SUTD, a lot of our students are very skilled at the computers and software. So someone like Rachel, I just sent her there. She has some drawings, but she also has the computer. But with the computer, yeah, so here you can see with the computer, she's right there in the center, okay, commanding all the installers what to do, and then checking. I'm there, I'm just using my eye power to looking at the computer model and seeing that everything is right. But I'm just coming there to check once in a while. Rachel is there the whole 2 days. Was it 2 days? 3 days to ensure everything is right. And thankfully, everything was installed okay. So this is the last slide that we have about Venice Biennale, No More Free Space exhibition. So we restaged it in 2019. It was in the National Design Center. So this was how it. So I think just to sum up, and later we'll be happy to answer your questions. I think especially please direct them to Rachel. I think you're more interested to listen to her than me. I think it was not the students were very, very instrumental in getting this project done. Both Ines, especially, and then also later on with Rachel, as well as the bigger group of students, okay, that they didn't intern with me, but they're always trying to help out as well. So you get all these opportunities. It's great. You actually see how some crazy idea about tying together plastic and light actually gets transformed into an actual installation piece, and then sent all the way to Venice, and then the whole world gets to see it. So this is a great opportunity that you can get at this school. Okay, so I think that's it for sharing from my side. Pass it on to Michael, and as I said, uh, we, especially Rachel, will be happy to answer your questions. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Prof. Jason and Rachel, for the wonderful sharing. So, Prof. Jason, Rachel, and the rest of the student team must have had a thoroughly enjoyable experience working on Venice Biennale 2018. So, understand that the audience might have some questions for them, but let us leave it to the moderated Q&A session later on. So, moving on, we shall invite Prof. Michael, Amanda, Junwei, and Shafiq to talk more about working experience for Venice Biennale 2020. Prof. Michael, please.
Right. Hello, and thank you also that we can share our experiences with you. So I'm not sure, is the setup already correct? So what you see right now on the screen is actually more supposed to be a teaser. It's just an image of what we were working on for some time. But before I get to that, this is not meant to be up for a very long time, but it will be now because I need to introduce you to a few things as well from my side. The Venice Biennale is quite an amazing and unique event. So I come from Europe, particularly from Austria. And I was fortunate enough that I lived only about 4 hours away from Venice. And when I personally was at the Architecture Biennale for the first time, I found it was a very overwhelming and a very outstanding experience. And why? Because you see so much work from all around the world with so many facets of what architecture is about that you really almost have a hard time of processing what you see. So you just dive into this world, and there are things that absolutely appeal to you, some appeal less to you. So you just search out for these things that really inspire you, and you really you just your brain your mind just goes on like thinking about what these opportunities would provide to you. The Venice Biennale was actually scheduled again for 2020, and we had been working on a research project for some time. And our research project was looking at high-rise buildings, and will explain that briefly in the next few slides, in the next few images. What we wanted to look at is at a few aspects. One is decarbonization. So we all are facing climate change, and we know that we contribute a lot of what we normally call the carbon footprint to the environment. And many of us may be aware of that, but to those who are not, it maybe is a bit of a surprise to note that the built environment, so mainly our cities and all our infrastructure, contributes to about 40% of all the greenhouse gas emissions in the world. So when you just realize that and process it for a moment, you also realize that as an architect, we can contribute immensely to this, and we can really help to make things better and steer it in a different direction. So what we did was we worked with different materials, and we were also looking at buildings that are flexible. so that they can be adapted to future changes. And this is maybe something that I can highlight on this image to you. So in general, you see very generic, very plain high-rise buildings. And this was the purpose of this image also. But when you look in detail, you see that there are holes and then empty spaces in these buildings. And these empty spaces are due to the fact that not the entire building is permanently occupied. So we foresee a future where a building has some degree of flexibility. I mentioned this word before, so that let's say if a space is currently not occupied, the community in the high rise may opt to transform that into a public or a shared function. So one of these shared functions could be what's illustrated here a little bit, some form of urban farming that people can actually grow either just green plants or can actually grow food together, or it could also serve purposes for like childcare or elderly care. So there is vast opportunities how these spaces could be occupied for that time. And then while we were working on this on this research project, okay, thanks. While we're working on this research project, we were also doing projects, and we tried to convert this a little bit into something that you would normally do in an architecture practice. But we had, of course, very limited time to do that. And when we did that, that is actually when it was most important for us that we could bring in students to share the experience. So today, as mentioned before, I'm lucky to have with me Amanda and Chin Wei, who are both graduates from here, but also Shafiq. And apart from Shafiq, we had, I don't know, I think about 10 to 12 students who on and off would come in and help us. And they helped us establish designs. And this was what led to this image first. And then for the Venice Biennale, it seemed quite a suitable topic, but I'll come back to that in a second. Let me just explain to you first here on this slide that, as I mentioned before, the lowering the carbon footprint is an important topic. And what we see here is we know that our environments, in particular a city like Singapore, is mainly built out of concrete, at least when it comes to housing and our residential environments. So what we try to do here is to supplement and replace part of the concrete structure with a renewable material. And the most mature renewable material, so a material that regrows, that we have available is wood, or in the construction context is also referred to as timber. So this is a mixed construction of concrete and timber. And now what's interesting about this, we all know from our experience, if we are already trained or not, intuitively we know concrete is very heavy and is hard to move around, and timber is much more lightweight. So you can actually afford to have timber elements that you can take away or move or replace. So this is the whole purpose where I was mentioning before, that buildings can actually adapt and change over time. And this supported an idea that we could work for sort of demographic changes. So what that's referring to is population growth. We have a continuously growing population. We need to provide housing for them. So how do we do that in a manner that's sustainable? So as much as we want to bring down the material impact in terms of carbon footprint, we also want to extend the lifetime of buildings. So here you see then the vision of such a community, so that we have this moment where I said that parts of a building could be maybe even temporarily occupied with community functions. So you can see how we envision this community sort of evolving. And that was the moment where we got this opportunity to submit the project to the Venice Biennale curatorial team. So for the 2020 Venice Biennale, there was again a collaboration with here SUTD and the National University of Singapore. They invited people to contribute, and we became one of the selected projects. And this was one of the key images why it fits so well. the overall topic of the Biennale is how do we live together? And the Singapore interpretation of that was together. So how do we gather as people? How do we gather as a community? How do we live together? How, when we gather and in collaboration, envision the future, how would it evolve? And yeah, and then how do we live and live as a community? So the project for the Venice Biennale is called the Future Hybrid High-Rise Commune. So this is how it's envisioned. Of course, you're all aware in 2020, there was more or less a full stop to all our endeavors, partly economical, partly cultural, which is quite sad. And the Venice Biennale needed to be postponed. And the current schedule is for this year in May. So in May it should be opened, and we keep fingers crossed that it's actually taking place and also in a form that we can actually maybe then well, we will participate from the Singapore side, but then we can also travel there and see how our project is set up in context and what kind of conversation then goes on around what we propose as a topic as well. So what you can see here is the space, and what the curatorial team this year decided to do was to set up a number of around 15 to 18 tables and mimic what in Singapore we know as hawker centers. So those of you in the among the participants who may not be familiar with the Singapore context, the hawker center is more or less the Singapore version of Asian street food. So they were set up in the I believe 50s and 60s of the last century, and in a hawker center, you have different food stalls that serve different dishes, and then you can order them and bring them back to your own tables. And this was sort of the idea that there are different projects. So our project, our contribution is one dish with a very unique character. Also telling a lot about our Singapore context, our Singapore story, and you can bring this and then bring it to the table. So what we decided to do is we built a large model. The whole setup is more than 2 meters high, and you can then point an iPad to it, and with the iPad look at the model and then start occupying different apartments in this building and actually become part of the community. And you can also participate in a conversation about that. So what is your own vision on living in the future? So this is the model. As I said, it's 2 meters tall, and here you can see, and this is maybe just a slight contrast to the first image that I showed. As I said, the first image was intended to be very generic, so very normal looking, which as an architect is sometimes difficult to do because we envision a future that's very diverse, and then we also have this ambition to design things that look unique and have very unique characteristics. So that one was very very minimalistic. And here you can see that we're still working with the same system, but we can transform it to a different urban environment, to a different context. And here the environment is a circular table, so that's given to us by the curatorial team, and we decided that this will become the site for our building. And as we would have a site in a city, we took that as our site, and we kind of like transformed the building how it would adapt to these conditions. So you have this podium down there, which at the bottom, which is circular and which can provide mixed functions, while then higher up in the building it would be mainly residential, and then these shared functions that I was telling you about. And then here, maybe like just a short, a small snapshot of what was happening. So here you see actually Shafiq wholeheartedly engaging in the experience, and yeah, we were filming the model before we sent it off. You can also see that there are bits of colors popping up. So there is small 3D printed figures in the model. that are color coded to tell different stories of what these figures do. And they're kind of like teasing the visitors that there is something else happening at this in this model, and that you may want to explore that. So we actually will provide 2 iPads, and I'll see if this works. I can demonstrate this briefly. Okay, can you on your side stop sharing? Then I may be able to share the content on my iPad, and then I can briefly demonstrate how this is working or how we envision it. So one thing, maybe briefly, what we did not realize when we submitted our project, I think it was around October, November 2019. And shortly after, in December, we all heard the first news about a new virus in China, right? So when we actually got selected for the project, for us, it was still, I mean, this is going to be like a normal thing. The Venice Biennale is going to be happening in May. Nobody thought of a pandemic back then. And we found it quite interesting that our project was actually very well prepared for the challenges that we are facing. So since now we all got accustomed to physical distancing, right now we're in a setting where we are careful to remain safe. It also became interesting to realize in our own project that we offered a mode of presenting where we have a physical model, but then we also have the virtual world here on the iPad that can also be accessed by people from all around the world. So meaning that we will also have a website running in parallel where anyone at any time, anywhere in the world can log in and participate in this high-rise community. So you can log in, choose your apartment, occupy it, take part in the conversation, and participate in this whole thing. So that was quite an interesting moment to realize that we are with this hybrid mode that we're sort of like involuntarily prepared. So I just need to check, is it possible that you stop sharing the content and let me share from my side? Or do you need to, while we do that, we still have maybe like a few minutes. Oh yeah. Okay, great. And let me share this quickly first, and then maybe we have some time. So I'm trying to share the content right now. All right, this takes a second. So now you should see my screen. And I need to go to our AR interface. So this is called augmented reality, AR. And oh, that was fast. So normally I need to point it to a QR tag. So maybe you saw that flash up briefly. We have a QR tag here prepared where you point the iPad to, and then you get connected to the content. So now I can look at the model. So it's in front of me, and right now I'm only able to demonstrate a virtual model, right? You can see that, but it has the exact same size as the physical model. And at the exhibition, the virtual model and the physical model will overlay. So now I choose to create a unit, and I just do that based on my own situation. I'm married with 2 small children, and I'm gonna see what part of the building I can occupy here. So do I want it affordable? Yes, of course. And how many single bedrooms? Well, I want a bedroom. Well, maybe let's have a guest bedroom. So I want an affordable unit, but yet I want as much as possible. And then let me have a study room as well. So maybe that's a bit too much to ask for. And then I can decide where I want to occupy the building. So of course, again, I want to have something great. I want to live very high up, have a good view. And then I'm also asked what kind of shared functions could I imagine or would I prefer? So let me see, a playground would be nice, maybe a small market as well. And let me not be too selfish. Let's say we're also growing older. Let's think about the elderly, and let's submit this as a unit. So now I've created the unit, and what we can do is we can locate the unit in the building, and then we can also further participate in a conversation with each other. So I hope you got a bit of an idea how this is working. And yeah, I'm at the end of the session, so maybe then also in the collaboration we can have Amanda and Shafiq maybe share a little bit more with you what the challenges were, the learning experience, how we overcame certain challenges, and yeah, what were the most enjoyable aspects. So thanks. All right. Yeah. How do you want to organize this? Are we waiting for questions? Otherwise, we can directly share, and then maybe questions start coming in, or maybe you would also want to start asking us. Shafiq did a lot of hard work on the model. So, and Amanda, right after graduating from SUDD, shortly after, like within a few weeks, we didn't give you much break, right? You immediately joined us, and you were on the research project for the whole time, actually. So I don't know. I'm sure you want to share a few things also from your perspective.
More about the design. The high-rise building was to actually think about how we could design for the future, as well as how can we actually accommodate such a generic typology to the different forms of cohabitation. So the idea was actually sprouted from the changing demographic patterns in Singapore, how more people are actually choosing to live in single units, and lesser people are more intending to start a family. Yeah, so from here we actually would envision a commune that involves more sharing and more overlaps in terms of living experiences, so that it's also more economical, and things can actually change much quickly in the next few years, and how can we actually adapt to those changes. So having that portion, we were also ambitious enough to adopt the reduction of the carbon footprint that typical housing typologies do face in this current environment. So with decarbonization, with flexible changes in the design, and with digitalization, which we are doing now, applications, it's actually quite an ambitious project that we had for 2 years. So I'm quite actually surprised that we managed to pull that off. Yeah. So we actually don't be fooled by the generic typology that we have in the model. We have actually very grounded research and design applications that we have used to derive such a typology. So given the generic facade that you see in our model, in the floor plan, it actually consists of the ideas of a very typical HDB unit, except that it's more flexible and adaptable. So within the unit, you have, like Michael mentioned, very flexible changing building components, which could potentially be made out of timber construction material. And then within the next decade or so, as the demographic change, different building components can be removed and replaced within the building. So the use of timber has the ability to reduce the carbon footprint. And over time, with the reuse of the same building materials, you can also potentially reduce the carbon footprint even further. So that was the overall kind of scope that we sort of developed over time.
Yeah. So unfortunately, this year we are in our situation. We cannot yet report how our experience was in Venice. So that's a sad thing. We were just talking with Shafiq how that would have panned out. So now we don't know how it's going to work out this year. But Shafiq, will you want to live in this building?
Yes.
Honestly,
Yes,
honestly. Yes. How did you become part of it? You joined us in an internship, right?
Yeah.
And then you were in between term 5 and term 6, right?
Yes.
In your studies.
So unlike everyone else on the team, I'm still a student. So a lot of my perspectives and experiences are based on a student perspective. And one thing important to understand is that Venice Biennale is a global platform where showcases the pinnacle of the industry's academia. So it's not something that most people should take lightly. It's a big thing where all the countries showcase what's best in their research, in their development. And to be involved in such a project actually showed, as a student, it actually showed the capability and the proficiency of current technologies in architecture. And we're helping on the model. And because I worked with such a high-profile academics here, I learned a lot as a student, which I would normally not learn in the working world, because working world and academia is very distinguished, quite different, I would say. And I got exposed to working on a model which will be showcased for a high-profile audience, where they will nitpick on all the little things. They will actually look at how you showcase your technology, your research. So you have to focus a lot on the details, which normally working professionals, they can skim on certain things because they cater to customers who don't really focus on details which you would otherwise be wary of. So to present to a high-profile audience like this, we had to do certain things to the models which would normally not require much effort, and it was astronomically harder because certain things like glue stains, how things align with one another, and we also had to consider how it was going to be transported to Venice. It's a 2-meter model. It's very fragile, so you have to consider how the different modules interlock with each other. So you have to consider the structural integrity as well. So I actually learned a lot from this experience as a student, and I will live in this building if given the chance.
Yeah, the experience is actually maybe not even that different from an office, because our model is fragile not because we want it to be fragile, because we have cost constraints, right? We cannot just build the model in a very expensive way. We have to do that really cheap with what we can do. So it's always a bit of like finding a balance between like the best possible result and the budget you have. And I hope for Shafiq that working on something like that, you overcome a little bit of a hurdle. So you have this fear of like how reality is gonna be, and what responsibility you have as an architect. But when you work on these small things that still have a high responsibility, you learn how to cope with that, and you become a little bit more confident. So even though you may think like this is not real, but I think the learning experience is quite a valid one as well.
Yeah. So thank you, Prof Michael, Amanda, and Shafiq for the wonderful sharing. Despite the COVID-19 situation, the team continued to stay motivated through the uncertain times to work towards their reality, making it a reality. So now we shall move on to the moderated Q&A session. Just a quick reminder to the audience that you may either drop your questions through the Google form, which you can access via the QR code above. For physical participants, please do raise your hand. I will address you directly. And those in Studio 4, a mic will be passed to you if you do have your questions. So please do introduce yourself first so that we get to know you too. So any physical participants here? Any questions? In Studio 4? Okay, I'll proceed to the online question first then. So Shirley asked, hold on. how many opportunities to help professors are there on average? So Prof Michael or Prof Jason, you may proceed to take this.
Yeah, maybe I'll just start first. How many opportunities? I think the professors at SUTD, the ASD department, a lot of them are doing research. So there are some doing research, like Michael's doing research on, let's say, energy and decarbonization. You have people like Stelianos who works with robots. You have people like Emmanuel who works with AI. They're always looking for students to help out with their project. So there's a lot of opportunities. Besides that, you will also, if you join ASD, you have to do internships. So the internship will place you with architectural practice. So for example, some of the adjuncts or people like me, we hire some interns for your internship. So you get a chance to understand also what life is like at the actual practice. So there is a lot of opportunity. That's one of the great things about SUTD ASD because we are actually quite small number. So we tend to really know everybody. And then if let's say there's always an opportunity, a very informal way, we might meet over lunch or bump into a student and say, hey, you want to help us out on something? And then student can work with the professor in an informal way, or they can start to apply. We have all these things called UROP, undergraduate research program. So there is a lot of opportunity if you really want to take part in it. Yeah. Want to say that?
Okay, thank you for the response, Prof. The second question we have from Shirley too is, what is the job linked with this pillar? Is there demand for such creative architecture?
Did you want to say something, Jason, or shall I try from this side? So every architecture school tries to establish a unique profile in a certain way. And at SUTD, as the title says, we try to merge technology with design. And in that regard, SUTD is, or at least it was at some point, the only university in the school that was a university of technology that had the big D of the design in the title as well. So we deal with that, with these two worlds and how we merge them on a daily basis. And one thing that Jason has mentioned, our students, our graduates are particularly well versed in computational tools, even though they sometimes are not fully aware of that, how their capacity is, but it's definitely a strength at SUTD to look at technology critically, but also to be confident with it. And in that respect, our graduates are pretty highly sought after, especially for these skills. So all the architectural practices out there have gone through a transformation from a pre-digital into digital working methods. So this is a very critical skill at the moment. And we think that here at SUTD we can provide this skill. And one thing that maybe some in the audience are not aware of is that in the first year, all students at SUTD study the same thing. Right? No matter if you become, if you go to the architecture pillar or to one of the engineering pillars or even computer science, and that again gives you a very different grounded base as a person and as a professional, where you are where you had been exposed to different aspects of technology.
Maybe let's ask Rachel, maybe, because Rachel now just graduated. She finished an internship, so she might have a good sense of what her friends are doing, what she's looking out for in the job. You want to say something?
Because you asked specifically about this kind of, I guess you're looking at like this kind of weird looking architecture, and you don't see it in Singapore, you don't see it around the world. So you might sometimes wonder if I'm doing something like this in school, is it then applicable when I'm going out to work? And what I can say is that actually through my time here in SCTD, you start to realize that architecture is actually quite a broad spectrum. There's like academia, so you go specifically into research. You can end up at a small to medium-sized firm where the focus is like maybe building residential, building like specific commercial. So buildings like that might be more grounded. It might be a bit more typical, similar to what you see in terms of typology around Singapore. And then there are bigger firms that also take part in competitions. So when you take part in competitions, you get to kind of pitch crazy looking buildings. That's how you get stuff like Gardens by the Bay or these weird looking designs and stuff. So I guess it depends on your interest. And then the good thing about SCT is that they let you have a lot of opportunities for internships. So you get a lot of chances to join different firms, try out different things like competitions, try out building like a small residential, find stuff that you're interested in, and then kind of decide where you want to go from there. So yeah, so that's my 2 cents on the issue. Yeah.
Thank you for the response. For the physical participants, do you guys have any questions to ask? Over in Studio 4. Okay, we'll proceed on to more online questions. So with regards to the communal living mentioned by Prof Budig, how do you manage the different demographics, families and their needs? And would this work in countries besides Singapore?
Okay, would this work outside of Singapore? We believe that Singapore is in a very unique position in the world, both in terms of like where it is in its development, but also as a unique geographic location, that a city is a country at the same time. So the challenges that we face here in Singapore can almost certainly apply to any other cities around the world. Cities particularly like Singapore and then Hong Kong and then maybe also Melbourne or Vancouver, or wherever you go, and of course all the biggest like the AA cities like London and Tokyo, they face challenges in terms of like property values, and that property values are skyrocketing so much that people cannot afford living anymore, and that in return results again to a process where properties get torn down and rebuilt only for the purpose of making financial benefits, which is a logical process in an economy. But it's of course not great for the environment, because we waste resources. We need to source for new materials, and we need to invest all this energy again. So in that respect, rethinking circularity. So circularity, I guess almost like everyone in the audience is familiar what circularity is, that we bring back whatever we use right now, we try to bring it back and keep it in the circle. We try not to throw away things, is an aspect that's very necessary anywhere. And how it works is maybe not fully resolved in practical terms, because if you were to like occupy a building and changing patterns, there is of course conflict arising where there is space where you could possibly extend, or who else would be giving up space. So there are some theoretical models that we've been playing with that could be applicable, but that again would encourage us to radically rethink how we live. So for example, in Singapore, one of the unique aspects is that people own their apartments, and this is part of the success. In other countries, people mostly rent apartments. And this physical ownership that's related to one particular apartment is, for example, something that we need to critically think about if this is something that can lead us in the future. We all know WeWork. We know that people can just go there and temporarily occupy a desk and then work there. And so you kind of like rent something on a temporary basis, and where you sit, what is most suitable to you, that changes like almost on a daily basis. And with living, it's not changing on a daily basis, but it's changing every few years or so. So how do we accommodate that? So maybe ownership in the future still exists, but it's not immediately tied to one particular space. Maybe it's ownership in terms of like sharing a part of something, and then thus be able to be flexible and expand where space is available. Or who says, on the other hand, that an apartment actually always has to be one unit? It can also be fragmented, right? If especially in the situation that you are in, where you're young adults, your minds are quite independent from your parents, but yet you live in one apartment. So why not have a scenario where you have a core apartment in the building, and then you actually occupy a room that's maybe not on the same floor, that's somewhere else, so you can anytime like be part of family life, but then you also have your own space. So there's multiple different scenarios that we could envision, and where we are maybe we just, as I said, like need to radically think things a bit differently and just be bold enough to try out things in different ways.
Thank you for the response. So now there's a question, can Polytechnic engineering course apply for architecture course at SUTD? And does a CGPA minimum requirement from Poly need to be, what does it need to be to get a higher chance of entering architecture course in SUTD? So we've checked with the admin side, and they said that you can apply, and the chances all depends on the cohort. So it depends on a holistic assessment based on your individual cohort. So all of you are free to apply. And another thing to note that when you enter SUTD, even if you are undecided on which pillar to enter, it's okay, because in year one, like we mentioned before, everybody will be taking the common year, freshman year. You will only be deciding it before you enter your second year. So it's okay if you decide to change pillar, enter the other pillars or stick to ASD. So it's fine. You just have to apply to SUTD and then enter the common year first. And then the second question we have, subsequent question is, what kind of qualities must a student of SUTD have? So I open these questions to the prof and students over here.
I think that's a great opportunity to speak.
Maybe I'd like to, I'm not going to answer the second question yet. I just want to something to add on to the first question about the Polytechnic students. I think we are really wanting to get more students from the Poly to join our program. And over the years, we have actually every year we do have students from the Polytechnic. And so it's definitely, we welcome and would like to have students from the Polytechnics. Having said that, I think there are some administrative issues regarding how the the schedules, and then whether you need A levels or this kind of stuff. So just to let you know, we are in the process of looking at it, and that we are actually Professor Keng Hua is starting to lead a kind of initiative to provide a path for Polytechnic students to more easily get into our program. So for example, a lot of Poly students are very, let's say, worried about the requirements in SUTD for math and physics. For example, they may not have so much, they don't do it at A level, so they worry they'll be at a disadvantage. So what we're trying to do in the school, we are providing things like, it's not just at ASD, but SUTD in general, we're providing things like, we call them compact classes. So the Poly students can actually start to take some math and physics classes while they are in the Polytechnic, and then so they can skip some of these classes when they come to SUTD. So as Nazreen said, I will encourage you to go and talk to the admin because there are definitely a lot of initiatives that addresses the Poly students directly. For the quality of the students, I think it'll be fun to ask the students actually what they think.
I don't think the best qualified student to answer this question, because there are a lot of better students who are ambassadors now. But one thing I feel is key to being a student at SUTD is that SUTD may seem like a very specialized university, especially to other people from NUS and NTU, because they have a lot of majors, a lot of different courses. We only have these few courses, and we sort of technically specialize in design and technology. But what I realized is that to be a student in SUTD, you have to be very open-minded, have to be this sort of multidisciplinary trait, because the 4 courses that we have currently, I think they're adding more. We are sort of intertwined. We know what each other we are respectively doing, and we also have capstone where we are actually forced to work with other pillars to work with a company and produce a project which helps actually best our working life sort of experience. It's very different in a way where you don't focus just on architecture per se, because you actually learn, especially Prof Jason's courses, you actually learn coding, you actually learn computational models, you learn how to develop tools. Like with respect to the project Prof Budig mentioned, Michael Budig mentioned, you actually have to come up with models and tools that generate different demographies, that predict demographies of different countries in different generations to sort of cater your design towards these possible outcomes. And to do this, is not, I wouldn't say it's purely architecture. You have to learn sort of coding, you have to learn AR. Working with, I think, Amanda and other members of the team, we actually learn how to develop Unity, as well as, I think you learn this in architecture core studio, Unreal Engine. You actually learn how to develop certain code, certain algorithms, use parametric design for your work, which I don't think a lot of other universities offer. So yeah, I think open-mindedness and being multidisciplinary to be able to adapt to different disciplines is key to being in SUTD. It's really very different than you expect as a university student, where you think you specialize in one course, but actually you learn a lot of other stuff. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
Rachel, is there like, so I always find when teaching in the school, or at least when I was thinking when I was a student, you always end up learning much more from your peers than your instructors sometimes, and being very impressed and inspired by your peers. So maybe my question to maybe first Rachel and then Shafiq and Amanda is, like, you've been in school for a while. Did you like share some stories about some of your peers and the qualities they have, what impressed you? Then maybe I'll say a little bit about what are the qualities of a SUTD student.
That's a really difficult. That's a really difficult question. But I think, like, in answer to Prof Jason, and also to add on to like Shafiq's point about open-mindedness, right? Um, One thing I always really appreciated about SUTD is that they let you try a little bit of everything. They understand that when you enter the school, you don't know immediately what you're interested in. You don't know immediately what you're going to be passionate about for the rest of your life. So what they provide for you is these tools and these like different courses that let you really go in and try a little bit of everything. Even if you think you might not like it, you might turn out to like it, or you think you might like something and then it turns out, okay, it's not the thing for me. And then by really providing all these opportunities, what happens is then you as an individual, by like testing and trying all these different things, you start to figure out what is your own preferences, what is something that is like your style, or like things that you're really interested in. And then when it comes to thesis, then you ultimately get to see all these students come out and really show their passion and their interest in like a huge variety of topics. And the great thing about SCTD is that it doesn't limit you. It doesn't say, oh, you just have to do computation, or you just have to do like an aesthetic design. You can go into AI motivated design. You can go into drones. You can go into like even just very standard simple housing, and the professors here are really so open and so nice to just encourage you and support you along the way. So I guess when you come here, just come like I think it's really the open-mindedness, and also come with the intention to find something that you enjoy. I think then you really benefit the most from your time here. Yeah, that answers the question.
we hand over to the graduates and students on our side, I just want to mention one aspect that you have not mentioned yet. One thing that I can observe, although I'm not part of the student community, is that there is a very cohesive community, and that students help each other out. And this is something that I find really amazing about SCTD. So Jason already mentioned that you may expect that you may struggle in certain fields. And then I can actually just say, like, don't worry too much. You will have peers and other students who are around you who are there and willing to help you. And as I said, I find that really impressive, because this is far from what I have experienced when I was a student. I've never experienced anything like that. But again, we have more from the graduates sharing on our side.
So I'm Chunwei. I graduated from Poly. I did civil engineering. I came into SUTD. So what I think about Poly students, the first year was difficult, really difficult, because I lacked the fundamentals. I had to really catch up. Don't think that it will be an easy life in the first year compared to the JC students. I don't know. I find that they're always like taking it in a breeze, like for the first year. And I was like struggling, staying up late nights just to survive. But I don't know, eventually it paid off. Like think about it as a learning journey. The demography of the people in Poly, your learning environment is totally different in Poly as compared to over here in SUTD. The peers are more supportive, definitely. That's what I can say. Like the technical aspects, because as a Poly student, you have a more holistic kind of development from Poly growing up. And yes, that's what. If you want to know more, you can find me like over here. You can ask more questions. I'll give you more specific answers, which I think some things I can't share here.
Thank you so much for the sharing. Before I proceed to more online questions, can I just ask physical audiences, do you guys have questions? Okay, you may introduce yourself and your question.
From here?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, I'm Joshua Tay. I'm an early matriculating student coming in this year. I really love the design of the building because it has a lot of modularity, and you guys also use like eco-friendly materials such as timber to make it easier to be more modular. So I feel like this opens up a lot of opportunities for like artificial intelligence or like big data to like be incorporated into the process of build, improving the building. So for example, maybe like AI, like what other applications for AI do you see in this design?
Okay, all right, thank you. So his question would be, what other applications for AI do you see in this design? Open to the panel.
Well, I think yeah, that's a very interesting aspect. So thanks. I appreciate that you like it. It's very nice to hear. Yeah, of course, our artificial intelligence plays a very important role nowadays, and there are several aspects in our tools where something in that direction is actually embedded. And when it comes to what you said, that's definitely exciting. So one thing, for example, that that's been in my mind for a while is blockchain technologies could be something also very, very suitable for buildings, where we talk about circularity, and you could actually embed a code in every single building component, so that like as I understand as a lay person, a blockchain kind of like has initial information where it was created, where it's coming from, and then it's taken over by another party and it's being processed. And in the architecture world, it could mean like it's manufactured by someone at a certain point and then further handed on. So something like that could be super useful, and that's something that as I said, like has been in my mind for a while and that I could find exciting. In terms of demographic distributions, there's definitely a few applications as well that we could imagine. One thing that we have embedded is a challenge in architecture is a building is highly complex in terms of how many elements have to come together. And every single building is unique. There is no such thing as two identical buildings, which is very, very different from car manufacturing, any other industries. And in architecture, in the building industries, we have this situation where in the beginning of a design process, we know very little. We have very little data about the future of the building. I mean, we have a lot of experience. We have data from that, but not about that particular building. So what we were playing with, what we were researching in, is actually to develop tools now, especially for lowering the carbon footprint, where we were testing out, collecting data from existing buildings, and then measuring their parameters, and then using those parameters in a mathematical model in order to predict how likely it's going to be that our building that we are working on is going to achieve results in a certain range, right? So this is predictability of things, and there's always a range of possible outcomes, and this makes it actually quite interesting and exciting to link that with both mathematical models, and then once they are established, you're already in the realm of artificial intelligence, and then you can actually try to go a bit deeper in that and enable it actually to learn. So then that would fall under the category of machine learning, that these models are not static and you don't have a model that just can calculate right now it's like that, but you can actually have a model that constantly gets new data and then learns based on that new data. So this is where we found a direct link between what would fall under artificial intelligence or even machine learning.
Thank you for the question. So I open up more physical participants. Any questions from this studio or in Studio 4? Do you guys have any questions over there?
Do we have a question here?
Okay. You may introduce yourself and the question that you have.
This is the mic. I think you just speak out loud.
Okay. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. First of all, I'm Chu Yao Min.
Yeah.
I would like to find out. Is there any opportunity for this fifth row club called Studio to organize public workshop during the Aki Fest thing, because it would be great if this fifth row showcase called Studio can organize more workshops for the public during the Aki Fest in the future. That means the architecture festival. I mean physical on-site workshop, not the virtual workshop. That's all. That's the only query that I have. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks for your question, Yomi. I think it's better. I don't know. Joey, is the student, anyone part of the fifth row club here?
There's Diane and the other side who was involved in the planning for Architect. So Diane, you were involved, right? Do you wanna help take this question?
Okay, Diane.
The question that you're referring to, are you referring to every ArchiFest event or collaboration with SUTD? Could I clarify?
Yeah, collaborative with SUTD.
I think the question, if I sum it up, is that can the studio sort of organize more physical workshops especially during events like ArchiFest. Yeah,
Okay. So ArchiFest and Studio is like basically a special collaboration between the Singapore Institute of Architects and also like within us as a SUTD student body. So then right, the only main issue for last year was that because of COVID-19 restrictions, so we have to work around with like COVID-19 restrictions where we have to like where each person must have like 10 square meters of like area. So ultimately the physical workshops in general are usually quite limited. So for the past 2 years that we have done this collaboration with SIA, it has always been physical workshops per se. But but you need to also understand that because of the current COVID-19 measures, right, all these cannot really happen in 2020. So most of the workshops are shifted to virtual. So eventually, right, as the time goes by and when COVID-19 kind of settle down, we'll definitely have more of these like physical workshops. And we also have like more collaborations between like different organizations so that we can also like bring these workshops to not just for student access but also for public access. Does this answer your question or do you need more like input, like answers?
Is the open house online or physical for this year?
This year the open house will be completely virtual because of COVID-19. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, nothing. Please.
Okay, thank you for the question and for the response. So before we are almost going to end, but one more question for Prof Budig. So in regards to the project by Prof Budig, I would like to understand if analysis regarding housing of the future also answers with reference to Singapore's increasing average temperature and green cooling solutions. Or does analysis also includes political issues, for example, if adaptable housing would affect how racial quotas for housing is set? So, Prof Michael.
I'm quite overwhelmed that we get so many questions. That's great. For the first part of the question, both aspects are very interesting. The first one, I mentioned that we are dealing with what's so-called embodied carbon, so the carbon footprint. But when we look at the overall analysis of how something contributes to the environment or what impact it has in buildings, we separate between the so-called embodied carbon and operational carbon. And your question is more targeting the second part, the operational carbon. So first we build a building and all the energy, all the resources that go into the building and then are there, that's called embodied carbon. And then once we take over, once we occupy a building, when we need light to replace daylighting, when we need to have aircon running, or at other countries when you turn on the heating, whatever we consume in the kitchen, the bathrooms, that's so-called operational carbon. And those aspects are very important to provide solutions. So in our design, we have considered a few, but what we have considered is so-called passive design. So for example, on the image of our high-rise, you would have seen there is a grid in front of the facade. So what we were working with is just taking advantage of, if you have a grid in front of the facade with elements just cantilevering a bit out, you will provide shade, and then you will sort of like lower the solar, the impact the sun creates, right? So you can sort of like prevent overheating. So we do consider this, but there are other people who are experts in this field. And then actually this field of operational carbon is more studied currently. So we can expect a significant advancement. So we are already undergoing, right? Solar panels, all that. So that's already quite heavily worked on. And the part that we are working on, embodied carbon, is a little bit less studied. So we felt there is a need to contribute here. And then the second question is, of course, quite sensitive when you talk about political issues. So when you think about the demographic changes, what we would like to provide is a tool that other people can apply. So the way the algorithm works, and actually that's also, of course, artificial intelligence, maybe on a lower level of technical complexity, but we have a distribution algorithm. So when you choose the algorithm inside the iPad, or what we have encoded, that helps you find a location where my profile as an occupant could fit in, right? And then all these algorithms, they need certain boundary conditions or constraints. So they need rules. You cannot just set up an algorithm without having finding certain limits, right? So you need these limits, and some of these constraints and boundary conditions could, for example, be that you want a certain demographic mix. So that's actually up to those who then would apply these algorithms, or who would further work and further develop them to make these decisions. So we just want to provide something that does not specify a certain outcome, but we want to provide something that other planners can use, and then they can work with it and take advantage of these tools. Yes, I hope that kind of clarifies these questions, but both very interesting aspects.
Okay, thank you, Prof, for the sharing. We have a few more online questions. So some of them include, in the outside world, do people work more in teams? Does SUTD place more weightage on team-created works or individual works? And additionally, is SUTD syllabus fast-paced? What happens if one is a slow learner? Okay.
Yeah, let me maybe answer or address some of those questions. So the question is, in the practice, do you work more in teams? Depending, yes, definitely you have to work in a team. The composition of the team depends very much on what the project is. So of course, a bigger project requires more, let's say, architects to work on. And then beyond that, to realize the piece of architecture requires a much bigger team than just architects itself. So you will have to learn to work with other kind of consultants, specialist consultants. So recognizing the nature that this is architecture practice and what goes on, what it takes to realize a building, I think, yes, at SUTD, we do actually put quite a bit of weight on teamwork. So a lot, or quite a few of the assignments or the projects, example, it's not specific to the architecture department, but it's a project called Capstone. So this is a very important project that most students will do in the third year, final year. So the architecture students will work with the engineering students from doing information science or doing product design. So we find that it's very important skill to know how to work with others, and so that's something that we really encourage in the school.
I can share something quickly also from our teachers, professors side. I'm also teaching a course that's called Design Thinking and Innovation in the first year. It used to be called Introduction to Design. And one important component was always what we used to call team health, and what we are now revamping and further expanding into something that's called design collaboration. So we identify that teamwork is essential in a professional environment. It actually doesn't matter if it's architecture somewhere else, but architecture particularly is very much based on collaboration. You constantly need to communicate. You need to have a collaboration with your client even. He's not just a consumer who will just look at a shelf and then pick something, but he will be part of the process, and that process is very long. And of course, all the expert planners, other stakeholders like authorities are part of this. So it's a very essential skill. And we try to more and more also learn how to address that together with our students, and then we will further expand that. So as I said, like, we identified it as a skill, and we also have a conversation with our students in the first year to identify what could this mean for myself, what responsibilities do I have, what attitude do I need to bring to other people, and what do I expect from other people. So there's a lot of empathy and respect involved, and we're investing quite a bit of energy into making this better. So I think it's going to be quite exciting in the next few years, actually.
I think let's ask the students or the alumni about their experience about whether SUTD is very fast paced.
I would say so. It's okay, it's okay. You can go first. It's okay.
I just want to interject answer the last question to respond to the last question. What happens if you are a slow learner? You just, quite frankly, you just spend more time learning. Seriously. But really, you need to have the determination to pull through. You need the mindset to be able to pull through with it. It's not gonna be easy. Don't expect that it'll be easy coming into SUTD. Yeah, that's the truth. I'm just speaking the truth.
And also maybe to add on to that, we've been very lucky because that the whole school is based so much on collaborative learning that actually your peers are really, really willing and very open to helping you in areas that like you're slowing down in. So for example, for me, I struggle a lot with coding, but I had like quite a number of friends who would hold like impromptu classes inside studio and be like, okay, let's go through what we've learned this week together. And then they will, if you have questions, you can ask your friends, and they're always really willing to step up and help you in areas that you're maybe lacking in. And then in exchange, you also help them with things that they might be lacking in. So it's really like a exchange of like skills amongst you and your studio mates. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think to add on, I think also what was mentioned earlier, I think definitely at the university level, we do want to challenge you, right? So you are at sort of the pinnacle of your academic studies. So you would also not feel challenged if everything is very easy. So to be real, yes, you will be challenged, I think, and it will be fast paced. There are quite a lot of things to learn. So as Rachel said, yes, your friends will help you. As Chinwei said, you have to have the determination. I think also from the kind of teaching point of view, we are aware that students all come from very, very different backgrounds. Some people are very mathematical. Some people are totally, let's say, comfortable with programming, and some people absolutely fear it. And then it is totally, it is, we totally recognize it. And so one of the good things I think is that so the faculty, we are aware of it, and we do try to help the students when we do see that they kind of fall behind. Again, that's the very good advantage of having a very small faculty to student ratio, so we can give you much more attention. And also, as a kind of formal thing, let's say to give you an example, in your very first term, if you do join SUTD, you have to take certain classes that are essentially physics, math, computation. Okay, and everyone has to go through this, but these are pass-fail courses. So we just want to expose you to some of these knowledge that we think is essential for you. At the same time, we don't want to penalize you, that it contributes to your GPA. Because again, we recognize some students maybe come from at A levels, they took advanced mathematics and someone else didn't. So on the level, individual level of the teacher, we try to help you. And at a formal level, it's also built into the system that some, at the very early stage, some of the courses are pass-fail. We would just want to encourage you to try things out without being fearful about failing.
Okay, so maybe to add on to what Jason has said, uh, in the term 4, which is the year where you enter into architecture, I think the learning curve for all the hard skills that you need to pick up, for example, CAD modeling and software simulations, there's going to be quite a steep learning curve. And it'd be best to pick that up in term 4 and secure it, because term 4 and onwards, it's more for you to develop your own architectural language and your own progression in the field. So I think term 4 is a very critical juncture of your whole Aki journey.
Yeah, one more last thing to add about that, because I think this is a very valid question, and we always have students sometimes saying, struggling a little bit. I think one good thing about ASD as well, the head of our pillar, Erwin, he always has feedback sessions with students. So this is actually very rare in other schools. So what we try to do is Erwin really wants to understand what the challenges the students are facing. And then this kind of, after the feedback session, he will basically kind of work with the instructors, and then we do try to adjust whether it's the scheduling or what we require you to submit according to the feedback given. So it's really, we are, I think, very, very responsive, or we try to improve in being responsive to the students' needs.
Can I just add something very personal? If you are labeled as a slow learner, also remain critical about that. If you enter university, it's a different world, it's a different environment, and different skills that you have may come out, right? So in the end, people find out that the place is not the right one. This is always something that happens. But on the other hand, if you feel you're in the right place, and at SCTD you have this opportunity after 1 year to choose where you think you want to head to, then you develop a certain passion. And I think this passion that you develop, that's something that probably is a stronger force within you than the challenges that you face. So when it is about this determination, there's also a part of passion that drives you, right? So that's a critical part of the experience, and in general, just don't let other people label you. Try to remain yourself and become yourself.
Thank you so much, panelists, for this informative discussion with the audience. Looks like we will have to come to an end to this session. We have received quite a few queries regarding admissions, so please do refer to the SCTD website for more information regarding admissions to SCTD specifically. SCTD ASD has truly provided students with such unique opportunities to showcase their skills learned in studio and apply in real life alongside the faculty. So I sincerely look forward to more exciting opportunities to come in the future. Meanwhile, please do look forward to attend the next event, which is fabrication workshop held by a current PhD student, Po Hing, here at 1:30 p.m. Lunch will be served shortly, so please do wait for a while for the food to come. And thank you, and hope to see you guys again. Bye.
Thank you.